Stop for a moment. Stop the noise of the modern world. Stop the rushing. Stop the ticking of the clock on your wall. Can you hear it? It is the sound of silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of a different kind of time. A time that moved slower, a time that moved with the breath of the earth. We are taught to fear the past. We are taught that the medieval world was a nightmare, a place of mud and blood and screaming. We are told that the peasant lived a life of unending misery, groaning under the whip of a cruel master, waiting for death to grant them mercy. But what if we were lied to? What if the history books got it wrong? Deep beneath the layers of soot and industrial grime, beneath the concrete of our modern cities, lies a secret, a forgotten memory of a world that once knew how to sleep, a world that knew how to be at peace. There was a time, not so long ago, when a man could wake up, look out his window, and know exactly who he was. He knew his place in the universe. He knew the names of the stars. He knew the smell of the soil that would one day claim him. He was not anxious. He was not rushing. He was not chasing a ghost of happiness that he could never catch. He was a villager, and he was watched over. This is the story of the peace that was lost, the peace of the village under the Lord, the peace of the seasons, the peace that came from a world that did not change. It is a ghost story, but the ghost is us. We are the ones who are haunting them. We are the restless spirits looking back at a time when humanity was whole. And the question we must ask, the question that haunts the corridors of history, is simple and terrifying. In our desperate escape from the darkness of the past, did we run away from the only light we ever really had? 10 minutes. Historical background. To understand the peace, you must first understand the fear. Imagine a world without borders, without police, without governments. A world where the lights go out when the sun sets and they do not come back on. This was Europe after the fall of Rome. The great machine of empire had shattered. The roads that once connected the world were crumbling into the dirt. The legions that kept the peace were gone. And into that vacuum came the darkness. Tribes warred with tribes. Raiders swept down from the north. Bandits roamed the forests. It was a time of chaos, a time when a man could lay his head down to sleep at night and never wake up. A wolf at the door, a fire in the fields. Humanity was drowning in uncertainty. Survival was the only law. And from this chaos, a desperate cry went up. It was not a cry for freedom. Freedom is a luxury for those who are safe. It was a cry for protection. It was a cry for order. Give us safety, they said. Take our land, take our labor, take our freedom. Just keep the wolves away. And so the deal was made. Out of the ashes of the Roman world, a new system rose. It was not born of evil, but of necessity. It was called feudalism. But that is a dry academic word. It does not capture the reality of life on the ground. It was a web of iron, a great chain that bound the earth to the sky and the Lord to the peasant. At the top sat the king. Below him, the great dukes and earls, and below them, the knights and the lords. And at the very bottom, buried deep in the warm earth, was the village. The Lord was the master. He owned the land. He owned the trees. He even owned the people who lived on his land. They were his serfs, his property. But look closer. Look past the surface of the history books, because in that ownership, there was a covenant. The Lord was not just a master, he was a shield. He built the stone walls. He raised the tower. He trained the men at arms to stand watch with spears and crossbows. In return, the village gave them their lives. This was not a contract signed in ink. It was a contract written in blood and soil, passed down from father to daughter, from mother to daughter for centuries. The political landscape was not a map of nations. It was a map of obligations. You work for me, I protect you. You pray for me, I feed you. It was a closed system, a sealed ecosystem. There was no outside. There was nowhere else to go. The world was vast and terrifying. The village was small and safe. The Lord was the father figure, the stern, distant, sometimes cruel father, but the father nonetheless. And the villagers were his children. They were dependent, they were ignorant, they were powerless, but they were safe. And in that safety, a strange and quiet flower began to bloom. It was the flower of routine, the flower of rhythm. The chaos of the world was kept at bay by the stone walls. The wars of kings were distant thunder, rarely felt in the valley. Inside the village, time began to slow down. They learned the secrets of the earth. They learned that if you planted a seed in the cold mud of spring, the sun would bring it to life. They learned that if you harvested the grain before the first frost, your children would not starve. This was the birth of the medieval village, a small island of light in a sea of darkness. A place where the clock was not made of gears and springs, but of the rising sun and the changing leaves. They did not know they were living in the dark ages. To them, it was just life, and it was peaceful. The village wakes, not to the shriek of an alarm clock, but to the gray light of dawn creeping through the smoke holes in the thatched roofs. The air is cold. It smells of damp earth and dying embers. The day begins with the animals, the lowing of the cattle, the bleating of the sheep, the rooster crowing in the yard. These are the only bells that matter. Slowly, the figures emerge from the huts. They are wrapped in rough wool, dyed the color of the earth, browns and grays and dull greens. They are stooped from years of labor. Their hands are calloused, rough as tree bark. But look at their faces. There is no panic, no frenzy of rush hour traffic, no stress about emails, no anxiety about the stock market. There is only a calm acceptance. The sun is up, the work must be done. The village is a living organism. It breathes, it eats, it sleeps. In the center stands the church. Its stone walls rise above the wooden huts like a sentinel. The church is the anchor. It is the tallest building for a reason. It reaches toward God. The bell in the tower rings. It is a deep, resonant sound that vibrates in your chest. It marks the hours. It calls them to prayer. It tells them when to work and when to rest. The Lord is watching from his manor house on the hill. He eats his meat from a silver plate. He drinks wine from a glass goblet. The villagers eat their pottage, a thick stew of oats and vegetables, from a wooden bowl. They are different worlds, yet they are tied together. The rise of the village was not a rise of technology. It was a rise of harmony. They learned to live with the seasons. This is the key. This is the secret that we have lost. To us, winter is an inconvenience. It is something to be conquered with heaters and SUVs. To the medieval villager, winter was a mystery to be respected. When the leaves turned gold and fell, the village knew that the time of growth was over. The earth needed to sleep. And so they slept. The pace of life slowed to a crawl. The days were short, the nights were long. They gathered inside the huts around the hearth fire. The fire was the heart of the home. They told stories. They spun wool. They carved wood. They waited. They did not fight the winter. They surrendered to it. And in that surrender, there was peace. The Lord provided the protection. The church provided the hope. The land provided the bread. It was a perfect circle, a closed loop. For centuries, this way of life grew stronger. It put down deep roots. The villagers became part of the land. They knew every rock, every tree, every bend in the river. They were not individuals in the modern sense. They were a collective. If one man suffered, the village suffered. If one man rejoiced, the village rejoiced. There were no police, there were no courts. Justice was handled in the open air, in the village green. The lord or his bailiff would listen. Disputes were settled. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It was brutal, it was swift, but it was final. There was no endless litigation, no appeals. You paid your debt or you paid the price, and then life went on. The fields were divided into long, narrow strips. Each family had their strips. They worked them together. Imagine the sound of the harvest, the swish of the scythes, the rhythm of the labor. 50 men and women moving in a line across the golden field. They sing songs, low, droning songs that match the rhythm of their work. They are not listening to podcasts. They are not thinking about their careers. They are watching the grain fall. They are feeling the sun on their necks. They are present. This is the rise of the great peace. It is a peace born of limitation, a peace born of knowing exactly where your boundaries are. The Lord owns you, the field holds you, the church saves you. There is no need to ask, "Who am I?" You know who you are. You are Thomas, the miller's son. You are Alara, the weaver's daughter. You are here. You are alive. You are safe under the watchful eye of the Lord. The sun sets. The work ends. The bell rings for vespers. The village returns to their huts. The fires are lit. The doors are barred against the night. And the silence returns, a heavy, peaceful silence. They sleep the sleep of the just because they have done their duty, and tomorrow they will do it again. For 300 years, for 500 years, nothing changes. The rhythm is unbroken. It is a hypnotic existence, a trance, and it is beautiful. History is written by the winners, and who won? The moderns, the capitalists, the industrialists, the people who destroyed the medieval world to build the one we live in now. They needed a story to justify their destruction. They needed to believe that they were saving the world from hell. So they painted the past as a dungeon. They tell us about the plague. They tell us about the witch hunts. They tell us about the brutality of the knights. But there are things they do not tell us. They do not tell us about the freedom of the medieval peasant. Yes, freedom. I heard you correctly. In the modern world, we are enslaved by our own desires. We are slaves to the rent, slaves to the mortgage, slaves to the endless need for more. We are free to move, but we have nowhere to go that is free. The medieval serf was bound to the land. He could not leave, but he could also not be evicted. The land was his right. It was his birthright. If the harvest failed, the Lord had a duty to feed him. It was the law of God. It was the law of the land. He could not fall through the cracks of society. There were no cracks. The village caught him. Think about that. No homelessness, no starvation while others feast, no uncertainty about the future. The Lord provided the grain store, the Lord provided the protection, the Lord provided the law. In exchange, the serf gave a portion of his labor. We call this exploitation. But is it? Is it worse than the exploitation of the modern worker who is used up and thrown aside when he is no longer profitable? The modern worker who has no safety net, no protector, no Lord. The medieval villager had a contract that could not be broken, not by the Lord, not by the king, not by God himself. And what of the time? We believe we have more free time than our ancestors. This is a lie. The historian Julius Caesar records that the Celtic people of Gaul did not work for money, they worked for themselves. The medieval calendar was filled with holidays, holy days, saints' days, feast days, festivals. There were over 80 days a year where no work was done, 80 days of rest, of celebration, of drinking ale and dancing on the green. Easter, Whitsun, Christmas, May Day, the Harvest Festival. When was the last time you took 80 days off to celebrate? We work 5 days, we rest 2. We are exhausted. They worked from dawn to dusk, but the pace was slow, and when the sun went down, the work was done. There was no overtime, no answering emails at midnight. The night was for sleeping, for dreaming. They lived in a world of magic, a world where the forest was alive with spirits, a world where the fairy mound behind the oak tree was a portal to another dimension. We dismiss this as superstition, as ignorance. But maybe it was a way of seeing the world that we have lost, a world where everything is sacred, every tree, every stone, every stream. They treated the earth with respect because they believed it was alive. They believed the spirits were watching. We know the earth is just a rock, and we treat it like dirt. We poison it, we dig it up, we destroy it. Who is the ignorant one? The man who talks to the trees, or the man who cuts them down to make paper for contracts he doesn't honor? There is another secret, a darker secret. The stability of the village came with a cost, the cost of privacy. There were no secrets in the medieval village. Everyone knew everyone. Gossip was the police force. Shame was the prison. If you sinned, everyone knew. If you broke the rules, the village turned on you. You were shunned. You were cast out into the wild. The peace was maintained by absolute conformity. You dressed like your father. You worked like your mother. You believed what the priest told you to believe. There was no room for the individual. The ego was crushed. To a modern person, this sounds like hell. We prize our individuality above all else. But ask yourself, does your individuality make you happy? Does the burden of being yourself crush you? In the village, you didn't have to be yourself. You just had to be. The burden of choice was taken away. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is the peace we are looking for, the peace of not having to choose. The church and the lords benefited from this silence. They wanted a population that was quiet, that worked, that prayed. They hid the truth that human beings can be content with very little. They hid the truth that a simple life, bound by the seasons, is a happy life. Because if we knew that, if we really knew that we could be happy in a mud hut, eating turnips and sleeping on straw, then their palaces of gold, their stock markets, their empires, they would mean nothing. The greatest suppressed fact of history is this: they were happy. They were poor, they were dirty, they were tired, but they were at peace. Nothing lasts forever, not even the silence. The peace of the village was fragile. It relied on the world staying the same. It relied on the walls being high enough. But far away, beyond the horizon, the world was changing. The year is 1348. A ship docks in a port in Sicily. The sailors are dead or dying. Black swellings cover their bodies. The air coming from the hold smells of death. The rats scramble down the ropes. They carry the fleas. The fleas carry the bacteria. Yersinia pestis, the Black Death. It moved faster than any army, faster than the wind. It swept across Europe like a scythe through wheat. In the villages, they didn't know what was happening. They heard rumors, a sickness, a punishment from God. They prayed, they lit candles, they confessed their sins. But the Lord did not save them. The stone walls did not stop it. One by one, the villagers fell. The miller, the baker, the smith. The lord in the manor died too. His gold could not buy him breath. The village bells stopped ringing. There was no one left to pull the ropes. The silence that was once peaceful became the silence of the grave. Half of Europe died. Half of the world was erased. Imagine the trauma. Imagine the psychological break. Everything they believed was a lie. The church was powerless. The Lord was dead. The natural order had been shattered. But out of this death, something strange was born: survival. The villagers who survived found themselves in a new world. The labor shortage was immense. There were not enough hands to plow the fields. For the first time in 1,000 years, the peasant had power. They could negotiate. They could demand wages. They could move. You want me to harvest your grain, Lord? Pay me, or I will go to the next village who will pay me. The spell was broken. The peace of the great chain of being was shattered. The lords tried to fight back. They passed laws to force the peasants back to the land. They tried to freeze the wages, but it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle. The idea of freedom had entered the minds of the villagers. This was the turning point. Not a battle, not a coronation, but a shift in the mind. The villagers realized they did not need the Lord. They realized they could survive on their own. The seasons still turned. The sun still rose. They could work the land themselves. They wanted their own freedom. They wanted to sell their crops. They wanted to keep the money. The peace of the village, the peace of dependence, was replaced by the hunger for more. It started slowly, a fence here, a dispute over a boundary there. Then came the money. Before, the Lord took his share in grain, in eggs, in labor. It was a natural exchange. Now he wanted cash. He wanted taxes. To get cash, the villagers had to sell their produce. To sell produce, they had to grow more than they needed. Surplus, greed. The village was no longer just for survival. It was for profit. The rhythm changed. The slow seasonal pulse was replaced by the frantic beat of the market. Then came the machines, not the steam engines yet, but the early machines, the water mills, the fulling mills. Technology began to creep into the valley. The lords realized they could make more money by enclosing the land, by kicking the peasants off the strips and turning the open fields into sheep pastures. Sheep for wool, wool for the booming cloth trade in Flanders. The Enclosure Acts. It sounds like a bureaucratic term. It is a word of violence. It meant the end of the village. The hedge went up. The ditch was dug. The sign went up. Private property. Keep out. The villagers who had worked that land for 1,000 years were now trespassers. They were evicted. They became beggars. They wandered the roads. They went to the towns, to the cities, to London, to Paris. They looked for work. They found nothing but filth and disease. The peace in the village was traded for the noise of the city. The decision was made in secret chambers by men in silk robes who had never held a scythe. They decided that the old way was inefficient. It was backwards. It had to go. They killed the village to build the economy. And we let them. We wanted it. We wanted the money. We wanted the freedom. We sold our peace for a handful of coins. It did not happen all at once. It was a slow death, a fading away. First, the young people left. They saw no future in the mud. They wanted the bright lights of the city. They wanted to be someone else. The village grew old. The thatched roofs began to leak. The stone walls crumbled. The weeds grew in the churchyard, choking the graves. The Lord, seeing no profit, left the manor. He moved to the court. He built a new house in the city, away from the damp and the smell of cows. The great hall fell silent. The hearth fires went cold. The bell in the tower stopped ringing. There was no one left to pull the ropes. The silence that was once peaceful became the silence of the grave. You can still see them today, in England, in France, in the deep countryside. Mounds in the grass where the huts used to be, a lonely church standing in the middle of a field with no houses around it. They are called deserted medieval villages. They are the tombs of a way of life. The silence there now is different. It is not the peaceful silence of the sleeping village. It is the silence of abandonment. The world stopped talking about them because they were an embarrassment. They were a reminder of what we lost. We replaced the cycle of the seasons with the cycle of the clock. We replaced the Lord with the boss. We replaced the village green with the cubicle. We replaced the hearth fire with the television screen. The collapse was total. The medieval mind, the mind that saw the world as a living, sacred place, was erased. We became modern. We became rational. We became lonely. The villagers disappeared, but their ghosts are still here. They are in the names of our towns. They are in the roads we walk. They are in the festivals we still celebrate without knowing why. Halloween, Christmas, May Day. We are acting out the rituals of the village, but the spirit is gone. It's just empty pageantry. We are zombies, mimicking the motions of our ancestors, but feeling nothing. The collapse was not just of a social system. It was the collapse of the human soul. We severed our connection to the earth. We cut the root. And now we are floating in space, drifting, anxious, lost. The world rushed in. The noise became deafening. The silence was murdered. We did it to ourselves. We pulled down the walls. We opened the gates. We let the chaos in. We thought we were freeing ourselves, but we were just setting ourselves adrift. The death of the medieval village is the foundation of the modern world. Every problem we face today can be traced back to that moment when we broke the covenant with the earth. Climate change, it comes from our refusal to live within the limits of the seasons. We think we can conquer nature. We think we can consume without end. The medieval peasant knew that you cannot take more than the earth gives. If you do, you die. We are about to find out that he was right. Inequality, it comes from the enclosure. It comes from the idea that land is something to be owned and hoarded rather than stewarded and shared. The villagers had a right to the land. We have no right to anything. We are tenants in our own lives, paying rent to a system that does not care if we live or die. Mental illness, anxiety, depression, these are the diseases of the disconnection. We are animals living in a cage we built for ourselves. We are biologically designed for the village. We are designed for the sun, the soil, and the community. Instead, we live in concrete boxes. We stare at screens. We don't know our neighbors. We are starving for connection. We are starving for meaning. The medieval villager had meaning. He knew his place in the cosmos. He was a link in the chain that stretched from God to the earth. We are broken links, floating in the void. The global economy is just a continuation of the Lord's greed, stripped of the Lord's responsibility. The lords took the labor and kept the protection. The corporations take the labor and give nothing back. No protection, no loyalty, no shelter. We are working harder than the serfs ever did. We have more stuff. We have iPhones and vaccines and vacations. But we are terrified. We are terrified of the future. We are terrified of each other. The medieval villager was terrified of the dark, but he faced it with a torch in one hand and his neighbor in the other. We face the darkness alone. The consequence of the collapse is the world you see outside your window right now. A world of speed, a world of noise, a world of loneliness. We are the children of the abandonment. We are the orphans of the village, and we are screaming into the wind, wondering why no one answers. They never tell you that the serf had more days off than you do. They never tell you that he had a stronger community than you do. They never tell you that his life had a narrative arc that made sense. Born, lived, died, buried in the same earth. A complete story. Your story is a scatter, a mess of disconnected events. They never tell you that the progress we celebrate is actually a regress. We have moved backwards in terms of human happiness. We have sacrificed the qualitative experience of life for the quantitative accumulation of things. History never tells you about the dreams of the medieval peasant. We assume they were simple dreams, a full belly, a warm fire. But maybe their dreams were profound. Maybe they dreamed of a world where the wind in the trees was the voice of their ancestors. Maybe they understood the secret of the universe, that peace is not found in control, it is found in surrender. History is a record of war, of kings, of inventions, but it is silent about the millions of lives lived in quiet obscurity, the lives that actually built the world. The hands that mixed the mortar, the hands that threshed the wheat, the hands that rocked the cradle. Those hands are dust now, but the peace they knew, is it gone forever? Or is it waiting? Is it buried under the asphalt? Is it hiding in the shadows of our minds? History leaves gaps, black holes in the record. The biggest gap is the question, was it worth it? Was the plague worth it? Was the Industrial Revolution worth it? Was the destruction of the village worth it to get to where we are now? Look around you. Look at the stress. Look at the wars. Look at the environmental collapse. If you could go back, if you could stand in that muddy field in 1310, smell the wood smoke, hear the church bell, feel the safety of the stone walls, would you trade your life for theirs? History fears the answer, because deep down, we know the truth. We are the masters of the world, and we are miserable. They were the servants of the earth, and they were whole. What can we learn from the ghosts? We cannot go back. We cannot tear down the cities. We cannot all become farmers. The world is too full. The damage is done. But we can remember. We can remember that there is another way to be. We can slow down. We can choose to listen to the seasons again, even in the city. We can watch the leaves change. We can feel the cold wind. We can respect the rhythm of the dark. We can rebuild the village, not with mud and thatch, but with trust. We can knock on our neighbor's door. We can share a meal. We can stop treating each other as competitors in a race to the grave. We can find our Lord, not a master, but a purpose, something higher than ourselves. We can accept that we are not gods. We are animals. We are part of nature. If we destroy nature, we destroy ourselves. The lesson of the medieval village is the lesson of the limit. There is a line that cannot be crossed. The lord and the peasant lived within their limits. They knew how much they could take. They knew how much they could give. We have forgotten how to stop. We only know how to accelerate until we crash. The warning is clear. The walls that protected the village were not made of stone. They were made of balance. We have broken the balance. We need to find a new peace, a peace for the modern soul. It will not be the same. It cannot be the innocent, ignorant peace of the past. It must be a conscious peace, a peace we choose with open eyes. But first, we must mourn. We must mourn the loss of the village. We must grieve for the silence that was stolen from us. We must stop pretending that our progress is a victory. It is a wound that has been bleeding for 500 years. And we must stop the bleeding before the night falls for good. The sun is setting. The shadows are lengthening across the modern skyline. The glass towers reflect the dying light. Somewhere, far away, in a lonely field in England or France, a stone wall is crumbling. A single bird sings in the silence. The last echo of the church bell fades into the wind. They are gone. The villagers, the lords, the seasons, they are dust. Their peace is a myth, a story we tell ourselves to help us sleep. But maybe, just maybe, The myths are the only things that are real. We live in a world of light, artificial light. We banished the dark with our bulbs and our screens, but in doing so, we banished the peace of the dark. We are trapped in the blinding glare of the eternal present. No past, no future, just the harsh, unforgiving now. Look at yourself in the mirror. Your clothes are made of synthetic fibers. Your food comes from plastic wrappers. Your eyes are tired from scrolling. You are free. You are educated. You are healthy. And yet, you can hear it, can't you? The call of the mud, the whisper of the forest, the voice of the medieval peasant sleeping in the ground beneath your feet. He is saying, "Hush, sleep, the Lord is watching." But there is no Lord. There is no one watching. We are alone in the dark, and we will never sleep that soundly again. The history is asleep, but the nightmare is ours. Listen to the dark. It is 3 a.m., the deepest part of the night. In the modern world, this is the hour of the insomniac, the hour of the ambulance siren, the hour of the blue light from the phone screen, the hour of anxiety. But in the medieval village, at 3 a.m., the world is whole. The hut is a single breathing organism. There is no privacy here. There are no separate rooms. The family sleeps together in one vast communal pile. The parents, the children, the grandparents. They lie on straw mattresses stuffed with herbs, lavender, mint, thyme, to ward off the fleas and to bring dreams. The smell is thick. It is the smell of unwashed bodies, of wood smoke, of dried sweat, and of earth. It is not a bad smell. It is the smell of life. It is the musk of the tribe. They are entangled, limbs across limbs, breath mixing with breath. In the cold months, the animals sleep inside with them, the cow in the corner, the sheep by the door. The heat from their bodies is the only central heating they have. The villager does not wake up alone. He wakes up to the sound of the beast breathing in the dark. He wakes up to the warmth of his daughter's feet against his back. He is connected. He is not an individual floating in a void. He is a node in a net. Slowly, the light changes. There are no curtains to draw. The thin gaps between the wooden beams of the wall begin to turn from black to gray. This is the signal. The fire in the hearth has died down to embers. It is the heart of the house, and it must be awakened before the people can truly wake. The woman rises first. She moves silently, a ghost in the gloom. She rakes the ashes. She blows on the red coals. Whoosh! A spark catches. A flame lecks at the dry kindling. The light dances on the smoke-blackened rafters. The smell of the fire is the first smell of the day. It is the smell of safety. Outside, the cock crows. It is a sharp, violent sound tearing the fabric of the silence. The village stirs. You can hear it, the creaking of leather, the groan of timber, the low murmur of voices that are still thick with sleep. They do not speak to exchange information. There is no news. Nothing has happened. They speak just to hear the sound of another human voice, to reassure themselves that the world is still there. Water is fetched from the stream. It is freezing cold. It shocks the skin awake. Breakfast is not a feast. It is fuel. A piece of dark, heavy bread, hard as a rock. It must be soaked in ale or water to be chewed. A chunk of cheese wrapped in leaves, an onion eaten raw like an apple. They eat standing up. They eat quickly. The sun is up. The field is waiting. The Lord has not yet risen. The Lord is still behind his stone walls, under his wool blankets, under his velvet canopy. But the village is already moving. Walk with them out of the hut. The air hits your face. It is crisp. It smells of morning mist and damp soil. The village is not pretty, not in the way we imagine. It is a collection of small, squat structures huddled together for protection. The mud in the street is deep. It sucks at your feet. But look around. The sun is just cresting the horizon. It is a giant blood-red orb rising over the forest. The light hits the dew on the grass. 1,000,000 tiny diamonds sparkle in the field. It is a sight that no king with all his gold could buy. A sight that the modern man driving in his car never sees. The villagers gather at the edge of the open field. This is the rhythm, the slow, hypnotic rhythm of the day. They do not have watches. They do not measure time in minutes. They measure it in the length of shadows, in the height of the sun. Work until the shadow reaches the oak tree. That is the only deadline they have. The work is brutal. Make no mistake, it is backbreaking. The soil is stubborn. The plow is heavy. The oxen groan as they pull the iron blade through the earth. The plowman walks behind them, guiding the beast, feeling the vibration of the work in his hands. He is one with the ox. They move as a single creature. Left, right, turn, breathe. There is a trance state that comes from this kind of labor, a state of flow. The mind empties. The worries disappear. There is only the furrow, the next step, the next turn. We call this drudgery. We look at it with pity. But look at their faces again in the light of the mid-morning sun. They are not miserable. They are focused. They are present. They talk as they work. Gossip flows down the rows of turnips. Stories are told. Laughter bursts out suddenly and bright, startling the crows in the hedgerow. They are solving the problems of the village. Who will marry whom? Who stole the pig? Is the Lord Steward asking for too much tax this year? They are processing their lives together. In the modern office, we sit in silence. We stare at screens. We are anxious. We are lonely. We are isolated in cubicles. In the medieval field, they are shoulder to shoulder. They are a unit. If a man drops his scythe, 10 men stop to help him pick it up. If a woman faints in the heat, she is carried to the shade and given water. There is a solidarity here that we have lost, a deep, unbreakable bond of shared survival. They are not working for a promotion. They are not working to impress a boss they hate. They are working for the bread that will sit on their table tonight. They are working for the survival of their children. The purpose of their labor is immediate. It is visible. It is real. The seed goes in. The plant comes up. The harvest is gathered. It is a direct conversation with the earth. You feed me, the villager says to the soil, and I will care for you. They weed the fields by hand. They pull the invaders out by the roots. It is a meditative act. Touch the soil. Feel the grit. It is alive. This is the peace of the labor, the peace of knowing exactly what you are doing and exactly why it matters. The sun climbs higher. The shadows grow short. The sweat drips from their brows. Their muscles burn. But they do not stop. They cannot stop. The season waits for no one. The Lord rides by on his horse. He wears armor. He carries a sword. He looks at the villagers. He does not see them as people. He sees them as part of the landscape, like the trees, like the sheep. But he also knows that without them, he is nothing. Without their sweat, his plate is empty. Without their labor, his castle is a shell. He is the head. They are the hands. The body cannot survive without the head, they believe. But the head cannot survive without the hands. It is a symbiosis, a dark, unequal symbiosis. But it holds. It works. The bell rings from the church tower. It is noon. The work stops instantly. The sides fall to the ground. The oxen stand still. The silence rushes back in. Noon is not just a meal. It is a truce. The villagers sit in the shade of the great oak tree in the center of the green. They bring out their baskets. They do not eat alone. The idea of eating alone is foreign to them, strange, suspect. Eating is a communal act, a sacred act. They break the bread, they pass the jug of ale. The ale is weak. It is small beer. It is safe to drink because the water is dirty. It is brown and cloudy, but it is cool and it is sweet. They drink together. They wipe the foam from their lips. They talk about the weather. Looks like rain. Aye, the wind is turning from the north. Good for the beans, bad for the hay. It sounds boring, simple, repetitive. But listen closer. They are reading the signs of the world. They are meteorologists. They are biologists. They understand the patterns of nature better than any scientist with a satellite. They know that if the swallows fly low, the air pressure is dropping. They know that if the cows lie down, a storm is coming. Their lives depend on this knowledge. It is not a hobby. It is survival. While they eat, the children play nearby. They are not in school. They are learning by watching. They are learning how to mend a fence. They are learning how to churn butter. They are learning how to skin a rabbit. They are apprentices in the school of life. There is no distinction between work and play for the child. It is all life. They run barefoot through the mud. They are tough. They are resilient. A scraped knee is nothing. A bruise is a badge of honor. They are free in a way that modern children, trapped in safety seats and padded playgrounds, can never be. They roam the woods. They know the hiding spots of the foxes. They know where the wild strawberries grow. They are terrified of the woods, yes. The stories of wolves and witches are real to them. But the fear is thrilling. It sharpens the senses. It makes them feel alive. The adults watch them from the shade of the oak tree. A smile touches the lips of the blacksmith. This is the future. This is the continuation of the bloodline. The village is not just a collection of people living at the same time. It is a single, multi-generational organism stretching backwards and forwards into eternity. The grandfather sitting under the tree remembers when his grandfather sat under the same tree, eating the same bread, watching the same clouds. The continuity is absolute. Nothing changes. Everything is remembered. This is the root of their peace. The knowledge that they are not a fleeting mistake. They are part of a chain that will not break. The meal ends. The ale is gone. They stand up. They stretch their stiff limbs. The sun is past its peak. It is beginning its slow descent. The bell rings again. A single, sharp note. Back to work. The afternoon is harder. The body is tired. The food sits heavy in the stomach. The heat is oppressive. But the rhythm takes over again. The sides rise and fall. Swish, swish, swish. The mind drifts. They think about the coming winter. The firewood needs to be stacked. The roof needs to be thatched. The preparation is constant. The anxiety is always there, humming beneath the surface. Will we survive? It is a question that defines every moment of their lives. It is the fuel that drives them. In the modern world, we are anxious because we don't know who we are. They were anxious because they knew exactly how fragile they were. And there is a strange comfort in that clarity. The light begins to fail. The sky turns from blue to purple to bruised black. The first star appears in the east. The work is done. The tools are left in the field. They will be there tomorrow. No one will steal them. There is no point in stealing a plow if you have no land to plow. The villagers walk back to their huts. The pace is slower now, the heavy trudge of exhaustion. This is the time of day when the village feels most like a fortress. The world outside the walls is not welcoming. It is hostile. It is the domain of the outlaws, the domain of the spirits. They must get inside. The animals are herded in from the pasture. The sheep are counted, one by one. If one is missing, a search party goes out, a man with a torch and a dog. But tonight, they are all accounted for. The heavy wooden doors of the huts are barred. A thick beam slides into place. The Lord's men march along the top of the wall. The metal of their armor clinks in the dark. The gates are closed, shouts the captain. The portcullis crashes down. The drawbridge is hoisted up. The village is sealed. The feeling of relief is physical. You can feel the tension drain out of the air. They are safe for another night. Now begins the time of the fire. The hut is lit only by the hearth. The light is dim. It casts long, flickering shadows on the walls. The shadows dance like demons. This is the hour of stories. This is the hour of the truth. This is when the history of the village is told. Not the history of kings and battles, but the history of the people. Tell us about the great frost, grandfather. And the old man speaks. His voice is like dry leaves crumbling. He tells them of the year the snow was as high as the roof. He tells them of how they ate the bark of the trees. He tells them how the wolves came into the village square. He tells them how they survived. These stories are not entertainment. They are instructions. They are manuals on how to be human. The children listen with wide eyes. They drink in the courage of their ancestors. They are learning that they are strong. They are learning that they can endure anything. Outside, the wind howls. It rattles the thatch. It is a terrifying sound, but inside, it is warm. The family is together. The fire is burning. They are not lonely. Think of the modern evening, the television flickering, the blue light on the face, the scrolling, the isolation, the feeling of being surrounded by people but talking to no one. The medieval evening is the opposite. It is intimate. It is claustrophobic, yes, but it is real. They touch each other. They comb the lice out of each other's hair. They pick the burrs off the clothes. Grooming. It is a primate behavior, a bonding behavior. They are reinforcing the bonds of the tribe. As the fire dies down to embers, the talk stops. The prayers are said, the Hail Mary, the Our Father, words spoken in Latin, a language they do not understand, but the sound of the words is a shield. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts. They believe, they truly believe, God is watching them. The saints are interceding for them. They are not alone in the universe. They are loved by the Creator of the stars. Imagine the comfort of that certainty. No existential dread, no crisis of faith, just the simple, solid rock of belief. They lie down on the straw. The darkness is complete. The only sound is the breathing of the family, the snoring of the dog, the wind in the chimney. The village sleeps. The Lord sleeps in his manor. The king sleeps in his castle. And the world turns. It is a peace hard won, a peace paid for in sweat and obedience. But it is peace. It is the peace of the grave before the death, the peace of the wheel that turns and turns and turns and never stops. But the day is not the only cycle. There is a greater cycle, the cycle of the year. The seasons were not just changes in weather for the medieval villager. They were spiritual regimes. They were different worlds. Spring was the resurrection. The ground was hard as iron. The winter was long. The hunger was a constant ache in the belly. Then, the miracle. A green shoot pushing through the frost. The villagers wept to see it. It was the promise of life returning. They danced the maypole. They wove the ribbons. They celebrated the fertility of the earth. They went into the woods at night. They made love in the grass. They were helping the earth to wake up. They were casting magic spells with their bodies. It was a time of joy, but also a time of terror. What if the frost came back? What if the rains didn't come? They offered sacrifices, a lamb, a goat, a cup of wine poured onto the dirt. Please, they whispered to the ground, feed us. Summer was the reign of the sun. The days were long, the work was hard. The heat was a weight, the flies were a torment. But the grain grew tall, gold waving in the wind. It was the time of abundance, the time of fat. They felt the power of the sun in their blood. They stayed awake longer. They sang louder. They believed that the sun was a god, a charioteer driving across the sky, and he was on their side. Then came autumn, the turning. The air grew crisp. The leaves fell. The world began to die. This was the time of the harvest, the most important time of the year, the life or death moment. If the harvest failed, the winter would be a coffin. They worked with a frenzy. Every hand was needed. Children, old men, the sick. They cut the wheat. They bound the sheaves. They sang the harvest songs, songs that were thousands of years old, songs that predated the Romans, songs that predated the Christ, songs that thanked the earth for its gift. The harvest home feast, a table piled high with food. The last sheaf of wheat was dressed in ribbons and treated like a queen, the corn maiden. They carried her into the village and placed her on the altar. They were thanking the spirit of the grain for dying so that they could live. They understood the sacrifice. They understood that life feeds on life. We have forgotten this. We buy our meat in plastic trays. We do not see the blood. We do not see the eyes of the animal as it dies. They knew the cost of everything. Then came winter, the green death. The world closed up. The trees became skeletons. The sky turned to iron. The snow fell. It was the time of the wolf. It was the time of the hearth. They stayed inside. They spun the wool. They carved the wood. They repaired the tools. They waited. They told the ghost stories, the stories of the wild hunt, the spirits of the dead riding through the storm. They huddled closer. Winter was the test, the great test. Could you survive? Did you save enough grain? Did you stack enough wood? If you were wise, you lived. If you were foolish, you died. It was brutal. It was cruel. But it was fair. The seasons did not care about your feelings. They did not care about your ambitions. They were the absolute law. And living under that law brought a strange kind of peace. You didn't have to decide what to do. The season told you. Winter is for sleeping, spring is for planting, summer is for growing, autumn is for harvesting. You just had to listen. You had to surrender to the rhythm. And in that surrender, you found your place in the universe. You were a part of the dance, not the leader of the dance, just a dancer, moving to the music of the spheres. We must speak of the Lord again, not as a tyrant, but as an anchor. The relationship between the Lord and the villager is the most misunderstood in history. We look at it with our modern eyes. We see oppression. They saw it with medieval eyes. They saw order. The Lord was the father. The village was the family. The Lord provided the justice. There was no police force. There were no courts of appeal. If a man stole your cow, you went to the Lord. He sat on his chair in the great hall. He listened. He did not need evidence. He knew you. He knew your father. He knew your character. He judged you. Thomas, you are a liar. Give back the cow and pay the fine of 2 chickens. It was done. There was no paperwork, no lawyers, no years of waiting. Justice was immediate. Justice was visible. It was harsh. A thief might lose a hand. A poacher might be hanged. But it was certain. In a world full of chaos, certainty is a precious thing. The Lord also provided the defense. The raiders came over the hill, the torches burning in the night. The villagers didn't have swords. They didn't have armor. They were farmers. They ran to the walls. And there stood the Lord, in his shining mail, with his knights. They were the wolves of war. They were the killers. But they were our killers. They stood between the village and the darkness. The villagers watched them from the walls. They felt the thrill of protection. My Lord will save us. And he usually did. In return, they gave him his due, a portion of their grain, a portion of their labor, a few days of week work on his land. It was a tax, yes, but what do we pay taxes for today? For armies that fight wars we don't understand? For bureaucrats we never see? The medieval villager saw exactly what he was paying for. He saw the Lord's sword, he saw the Lord's wall, he saw the Lord's table. He saw the protection. It was a transaction, but it was a personal transaction. When the Lord died, the village mourned, not because they loved him as a friend, but because the shield was broken. Who would protect us now? The new Lord might be cruel, the new Lord might be greedy. The anxiety was real, but the system remained, the feudal bond. It was a chain, but it was a chain that held them together. When the storm came, the chain held fast. They were tied to the Lord was tied to the king was tied to God. It was the great chain of being. If you broke the chain, you fell into the abyss, and the abyss was waiting. But we must not romanticize too much. There was a shadow in the garden. The peace came with a price. The price was freedom. We spoke of this before, but let us go deeper. Imagine you are a young man, a weaver's son. You have a gift. You can carve beautiful figures in wood. You have a mind that wanders. You want to see the city. You want to paint pictures. You want to sing songs that are not about the harvest. You are different. In the modern world, you would be an artist. You would move to the city. You would find your tribe. In the medieval village, you are a problem. You cannot leave. You are a serf. You belong to the land. If you run away and you are caught, you will be branded. You will be whipped, or worse. You are trapped. And the village hates what it does not understand. They look at you with suspicion. Why does he carve those faces? Why does he not plow the straight line? He is strange. He is touched by the fairies. He is dangerous. They shun you. You cannot marry. No father will give his daughter to a strange man who carves devils in the wood. You eat your porridge alone. You sleep in the corner of the hut. The peace of the village is the peace of conformity. It is a crushing weight. It is the same weight that crushed the women. A woman in the village had no voice. She was property, first of her father, then of her husband. Her life was a cycle of pregnancy, birth, and work. Childbirth was the killer, the shadow that loomed over every bed. 1 in 3 women died in childbirth. Imagine the terror, the blood, the screaming, and the grief. If the child died, and many did, the mother was expected to get up the next day and go back to the field. There was no time for grief. The survival of the village depended on her labor. And what of the accused, the witch? The village was a place of magic, but also a place of fear. When the cow went dry, when the child fell sick, when the storm ruined the roof, someone had to be blamed. It wasn't bad luck, it wasn't the weather. It was the old woman who lived by the edge of the woods, the one with the cats, the one who mumbled to herself. Witch. The whisper starts in the bakery. It spreads to the blacksmith. It reaches the Lord.
And then the nightmare begins. The accusation, the trial, the torture. They are looking for the devil's mark, a spot that does not bleed when pricked. If they find it, you are gone. You are dragged to the stake. The whole village comes to watch. Even your neighbors, even your family. They watch you burn. Some of them are crying. Some of them are praying. Some of them are relieved that the evil has been purged. The smoke rises into the sky. The smell of burning flesh mingles with the smell of the harvest. This was the dark heart of the village. The peace was maintained by terror, not just the terror of the Lord, but the terror of each other. The gossip was the executioner. To be different was to be dead. So they buried their differences. They buried their dreams. They became the gray stones in the wall. They fit together. They held each other up. But they were silent. They screamed in silence. This is the cost of the stability, the total suppression of the self. The I did not exist. There was only the we. And if the I tried to rise, the we crushed it. We are approaching the end of this deep dive, the end of the journey into the mud. We have seen the peace. We have seen the horror. We have seen the rhythm. We have understood why they lived this way. But we still have to ask, was it better? Compare the silence of the medieval night to the noise of the modern day. The modern world is free. We can travel. We can love who we want. We can be artists. We can be atheists. We can be anything. We have conquered the darkness. We have conquered the distance. But look at us. We are the most depressed generation in human history. We are medicated to get through the day. We are addicted to distractions. We are destroying the planet that feeds us. We broke the great chain. We shattered the walls. We thought we were flying into the sun, but we are just falling. The medieval villager looked at the stars and saw the face of God. We look at the stars and see nothing, just burning balls of gas, vast, empty, cold space. We killed God, and we replaced him with nothing. We are alone in the universe. The villagers were never alone. They walked with the spirits. They walked with the saints. They walked with their ancestors. They lived in a world that was enchanted. Every tree had a soul. Every stream had a spirit. Every stone had a story. They moved through a world that was alive. We move through a world that is dead. We paved over the spirits. We cut down the sacred groves to build parking lots. We gained comfort, but we lost wonder. Is it a fair trade? We have antibiotics. We have anesthesia. We do not die of infected cuts. We do not lose our teeth in our 20s. And yet, we envy them. We envy their certainty. We envy their connection. We envy their sleep. We buy sleeping pills by the millions because we cannot sleep. We are too afraid to close our eyes. We are afraid of the silence because in the silence, we have to face ourselves. And we do not like what we see. We are hollow. The medieval villager was full of mud, full of lice, full of superstition, but he was full. He was a complete human being. He was born, he lived, he died, and he was remembered. We will be forgotten. Our digital footprints will fade. Our hard drives will rot. No one will tell stories about us around the fire. There will be no fire. Close your eyes. Let the darkness take you. You are standing in the field. It is 13:10. The air is sweet. The sun is warm on your face. You can hear the sound of the scythes. Swish, swish. You can hear the church bell. Cling, clang. You can smell the wood smoke. You walk towards the village. The mud sucks at your shoes. You see the people. They are dirty. They are bent. They are dressed in rags, but they are smiling. A child runs past you laughing. He is chasing a pig. A woman is baking bread. She offers you a piece. It is warm. It is heavy. You eat it. It tastes like earth. It tastes like life. The sun begins to set. The shadows lengthen. The Lord rides by on his horse. He nods to you. You feel safe. You feel held. You are part of the web. You are not an individual. You are a thread in the tapestry, and the tapestry is beautiful. You sit by the fire. The old man begins to speak. His voice is low and rough. Once, he says, once we were happy. And you realize he is talking about now. This is the happiness. This is the peace. It is right here, in the mud, in the blood, in the silence. You feel your eyes getting heavy. The firelight dances. The shadows retreat. You are not afraid of the dark anymore because you know who you are. You are home. Open your eyes. You're back in the room, the white room, the screen glowing. The silence is gone. The traffic hums outside. The fridge buzzes. The vision fades. But the feeling remains. A ghost in your chest, a memory of a time you never knew, a longing for the Lord, for the field, for the wheel. We can never go back,
The path is overgrown. The village is dust. But we can remember. We can honor the dead. We can acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of giants who walked through the mud. We can accept that our freedom came at a price. And we can try just a little to slow down, to watch the leaves fall, to smell the wood smoke, to break bread with a friend, to find the rhythm again, before the sun sets on us, before the silence takes us all. The history is sleeping. Let it dream. Look up. Above the smoke of the hearth, above the thatched roof, above the muddy street, there is a tower. It is made of stone. It is rough-hewn, gray, and weather-beaten. It has stood there for centuries. It will stand for centuries more. The church tower. It is the tallest thing in the village. It is the tallest thing for miles. In the modern world, our skyscrapers are monuments of money, glass, and steel, reaching for the heavens to prove our dominance. But the medieval tower was not built to dominate. It was built to point up, to remind everyone, from the lord in the manor to the pig in the sty, that there is something higher, something bigger, something that matters more than this life. The village was not just a collection of huts. It was a spiritual machine. Every aspect of life was calibrated by the church. The bell was the heartbeat of the day. Matins, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. 7 times a day, the bell called them to prayer. 7 times a day, they stopped. They stopped the plowing. They stopped the weaving. They stopped the eating. They knelt. They made the sign of the cross, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. It was a reset button. It was a way of cleansing the mind of the dust and the worry of the day. Remember, the bell said, remember who you are. You are a soul. You are not just a body that aches. You are a child of God. We think this was oppression. We think this was control. But imagine the relief. Imagine living in a world where there are no unanswered questions. Why are we here? To serve God. Why do we suffer? To test our faith. What happens when we die? If we are good, we go to paradise. There was no ambiguity. There was no existential crisis. The modern mind is tormented by freedom. We have to decide what is true. We have to decide what is right. We have to invent our own meaning. It is an exhausting burden. The medieval villager did not carry this burden. He laid it down at the altar. He knew the truth. The truth was written in the Latin on the walls. The truth was painted in the bright, terrifying frescoes of the Last Judgment that stared down at him from the church wall. Jesus sits on a throne of gold. The saved are on his right, ascending into light. The damned are on his left, screaming as demons drag them down into the fires of hell. The villager saw this every Sunday. He saw the devils with their hooks. He saw the boiling pitch. He was terrified, but he was also certain. He knew exactly where the line was. He knew what he had to do to stay on the right side of Jesus. He had to confess. He had to do penance. He had to give to the poor. The church gave him a map through the minefield of life. Without the map, he was lost. With the map, he could walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil. The church was the psychological armor of the village. When the harvest failed, the priest said, God is testing us. We must pray harder. When the child died, the priest said, God has taken an angel. He is in a better place. It made sense of the chaos. It gave a narrative to the suffering. We have lost this narrative. When the harvest fails today, we blame the economy. When the child dies, we just feel grief. Empty, meaningless grief. The villagers had a container for their pain. They had a ritual. They carried the coffin to the graveyard. They sang the hymn. They threw the earth onto the wood. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It was final. It was sad, but it was right. The church was the glue. It held the village together when the mud tried to pull it apart. It was the Lord's spiritual counterpart. The Lord protected the body, the church protected the soul. Together, they formed a perfect cage, a cage of safety. We live in the age of noise. Information is everywhere. It flows like a poisoned river. It comes through the wires. It comes through the air. It comes through the glass in our pockets. We know about the war in the country we cannot find on a map. We know about the scandal of the politician we will never meet. We know about the price of tea in China. We carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, and it crushes us. It is too much. The human brain was not designed to process the suffering of 8 billion people. The medieval villager knew nothing. He knew the mud. He knew the sky. He knew the 50 faces in his village. That was it. He did not know who the king was. He did not know what the pope looked like. He did not know that there was a new world across the ocean. His world was small. It was tiny. And this silence was the foundation of his peace. Ignorance is not bliss, but it is quiet. When the Lord went to war, the village watched him right away. They didn't know where he was going. They didn't know who he was fighting. They didn't know why. They just knew that he would come back or he wouldn't. They didn't worry about the geopolitical ramifications of the conflict in France. They worried about the fox in the henhouse. Their concerns were scaled to their ability to solve them. We worry about things we cannot control. We worry about climate change and nuclear war and the collapse of the financial system. We are paralyzed by the sheer scale of the problems. The medieval villager was paralyzed by nothing. He could fix the roof, he could mend the fence, he could chase the fox. He was the master of his domain. The news traveled by foot, by mouth. A stranger comes to the village, a peddler, a pilgrim. The village gathers around. They stare at him. They are hungry for news. What is happening in the world, they ask. The traveler tells a story of a dragon seen in the mountains, a story of a king who was crowned. The story is probably a lie. It is exaggerated. It is distorted by the distance it traveled. But it is entertainment. It is a wonder. It does not affect the price of grain. It does not change the weather. It is just a story. Then the traveler leaves and the silence returns. The village goes back to its rhythm. There were no newspapers, no radio, no internet. There was only the slow, steady accumulation of memory. The elders remembered the drought of 98. They remembered the flood of '05. They were the archives. The past was not a textbook to be studied. It was a living thing. It was the warnings of the grandfathers. Listen, the grandfather said, the swallows are flying low. The storm is coming. I remember when my father saw the swallows fly low in '42 and the sheep drowned. This was their data. This was their science. It was local. It was specific. It was relevant. They were not bombarded by the opinions of experts thousands of miles away. They trusted their eyes. They trusted their hands. The silence allowed them to think their own thoughts. To a modern person, silence is boring. We panic in silence. We reach for the phone. We need a distraction. But to the medieval mind, silence was a canvas. In the silence, you can hear the voice of God. In the silence, you can hear the thoughts inside your own head. In the silence, you can hear the rhythm of your own heart. We have drowned out our own hearts. We are so busy listening to the world that we have forgotten how to listen to ourselves. The villager lived in a bubble, a small, opaque bubble, and inside that bubble, he was free. Free from the anxiety of the distant, free from the responsibility of the global. He was responsible only for the soul standing next to him. There is a book written in the 15th century. It is called Ars Moriendi, The Art of Dying. It was a bestseller. It was the self-help manual of the Middle Ages. It taught people how to die. We do not know how to die anymore. We hide death away. We put the dying in hospitals. We cover them with sheets. We pretend it isn't happening. We are terrified of death. We fight it with every machine we have. We deny it until the very last second. And because we fear death, we fear life. We live in a constant, low-level panic. The medieval villager knew not death, not in the way we do. He knew it was coming. He saw it every day. He saw the dead bodies in the churchyard. He saw the animals slaughtered for the table. Death was not an intruder. Death was a neighbor. The Ars Moriendi taught death was a battle, a spiritual battle. At your bedside, the demons would gather. They would tempt you. They would remind you of your sins. They would tell you that you were damned. And the angels would gather. They would offer you the cross. They would remind you of Christ's mercy. The villager practiced for this moment his whole life. He confessed his sins regularly. He did good works. He prayed for the dead. He was preparing. When the time came, the family gathered around the bed. There were no beeping machines, no tubes, just the candlelight, the smell of wax and incense. The priest was there. He held the crucifix to the dying man's lips. "Vade retro, Satana," he whispered. "Get behind me, Satan." The family wept, but they also prayed. It was a communal event, a transition. The villager was leaving the village of the living and moving to the village of the dead, the church triumphant. He was going to join his ancestors. He was going to meet his parents, his siblings, his children who had gone before. He believed this with every fiber of his being. Death was not the end. It was a door. Imagine the peace that comes from that certainty. Imagine looking at the sunset, not with sadness, but with anticipation. Tomorrow, you think? Tomorrow I will see the face of God. This was the great comfort of the medieval world. It was the reward for the suffering, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Life was hard, it was painful, it was short, but it was just a test, a brief flicker of trouble before the eternal joy.
We have lost the eternal joy. So all we have is the brief flicker of trouble, and then nothing. The black void. The medieval villager pitied us. He pitied the soul who did not believe. He pitied us because he thought we were walking into the dark with no light. He was right to pity us. We are walking into the dark, but we have forgotten that the dark is where the stars are. The art of dying is really the art of living. If you know how to die, you know how to live. You know what is important. You don't worry about your status. You don't worry about your clothes. You don't worry about the fence. You worry about your soul. You worry about your love. The villager held the hand of his wife as he died. "I have loved you," he whispered. "I will wait for you." And then he let go. The priest closed his eyes. The family rang the church bell. 3 tolls. The village heard it. They stopped working. They crossed themselves. Another one has gone home. They were sad, but they were at peace. Let us step into the great hall. It is winter. The fire in the center of the hall is a roaring beast of orange and yellow. The smoke rises up, blackening the beams, eventually finding its way out through a hole in the roof. The Lord sits at the high table. He is raised above the others. He is eating meat, a joint of beef dripping with fat, a capon roasted with herbs, a pie filled with venison and pheasant. He eats with his knife. He drinks wine from a silver goblet. Below him, on the benches that run down the length of the hall, sit his retainers, the knights, the stewards, the favored servants. They are eating good food, but not the Lord's food. They drink ale from wooden cups. They eat coarse bread. And at the far end of the hall, near the door where the cold wind blows in, sit the common villagers. It is a feast day. They are allowed in. They are waiting for the scraps. They are watching the Lord. This is not just dinner. This is theater. The Lord is putting on a show of power. He is displaying his wealth. "Look at me," he says without speaking. "Look at how much I have. Look at how strong I am." The villagers stare. They are hungry. They are covetous. But they are also reassured. The Lord has food. The Lord is strong. Therefore, we are safe. The hierarchy was not just about oppression. It was about order. Everyone knew their place. Everyone knew what they would eat. There was no confusion,
No one asked, "Why can't I sit at the high table?" It was a question that did not make sense. You didn't sit at the high table because you were not the Lord, just as the cow did not sleep in the bed because it was not the man. It was the natural order. The Lord, after he is eaten, calls for the alms. He signals to a steward. The leftover food, the meat picked from the bone, the crusts of the bread. It is carried down to the villagers. They scramble for it. They catch the scraps in their hands. It is humiliating, yes, but it is also survival. In a bad winter, those scraps are the difference between life and death. The Lord is the provider. Even in his waste, he gives. There is a bond here, a dark, ugly bond, but a bond nonetheless. The Lord owes them protection. He owes them food in a famine. The villagers owe him labor. They owe him obedience. It is a contract of flesh. But there is a magic moment in the hall, when the Lord stands up, when the music stops, when the firelight catches the silver of his cup. He raises the cup. "To the village," he says, "to the harvest." "To the Lord," the villagers shout back, "to the harvest." For a second, they are one. The hierarchy dissolves in the toast. They are all eating, they are all drinking, they are all alive under the same roof, protected from the storm outside. The Lord is the Father, feeding his children, even if he feeds them the scraps. We have replaced the Lord's table with the supermarket. There is no high table, there are no scraps, just shelves of identical packages. But we are alone in the aisle. We do not toast the king, we do not toast the harvest. We check the price tag. We feel the anxiety of the cost. The Lord's table was cruel, but it was human. The supermarket is efficient, but it is cold. We must speak of the others, the ones who lived in the village but were not on the tax rolls, the spirits. The medieval villager did not live in an empty world. He lived in a crowded world. Every field had a spirit, a fairy or an elf. Not the pretty winged creatures of Disney, but the old gods, the spirits of the soil, the spirit of the wheat, the spirit of the oak, the spirit of the stream. They were dangerous. They were capricious. If you plowed the field without asking permission, the spirit would make the crop fail. If you drank from the spring without leaving a coin, the water would make you sick. The villagers walked through a minefield of invisible entities. They left offerings, a bowl of milk by the back door, a pin in the oak tree. They were polite to the air. They believed in the wild hunt, the ghostly riders who swept through the sky on stormy nights, stealing souls. They believed in the changelings, the fairies who would steal a human baby and leave a sickly fairy child in their place. They believed in the werewolves, men who could turn into wolves. We call this superstition. We call it ignorance. But it was a way of respecting the unknown. It was a way of acknowledging that nature is not a machine. It is a wild, living thing that cannot be fully controlled. We have cleared the spirits away. We have paved over the fairy mounds. We have cut down the sacred groves. And we have treated nature like a dead object, a resource to be exploited. And now, nature is fighting back. The climate is shifting, the storms are getting stronger, the viruses are jumping from animals to humans. We are terrified. The medieval villager would nod his head. He would say, "You have offended the spirits. You have taken too much. You have not paid the tribute." He knew the rules. You do not take everything. You leave something for the birds. You leave something for the spirits. You leave the hedgerow wild. You do not plow to the edge of the field. You leave a margin for the mystery. This was the deep ecology of the Middle Ages. It was wrapped in magic and fear, but underneath, it was a profound understanding of balance. They were the tenants of the earth. The Lord was just a subletter. The true landlord was the invisible world, and the landlord was angry if you didn't pay the rent. The invisible neighbors made the village feel full. You were never walking alone. The trees were watching, the stones were listening. It was a claustrophobic existence, yes, but it was a connected one. We are the ghosts now. We drift through our cities, unseen and unheard by the world around us. We have evicted the spirits, and now we live in a haunted house that we have built ourselves. How does a world end? Not with a bang. Sometimes it ends with a thought, a new idea, a whisper in the dark. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the thoughts started to change. The villagers looked at the Lord, they looked at his armor, they looked at his silver cup, and for the first time, they didn't see Father, they didn't see God's representative, they saw a man, just a man who bleeds, a man who fears death. The spell of the hierarchy began to break. The church, which had sold the tickets to heaven, started to lose its grip. The priests were corrupt, they were rich, they had illegitimate children. The villagers saw this. They whispered in the alehouse, "If he can break the rules, why can't I?" The individual began to wake up. The I, the dangerous modern I. I want to keep my grain. I don't want to give it to the Lord. I want to choose my own wife. I don't want to ask the bishop. I want to read the Bible myself. I don't need the priest to tell me what it says. This was the birth of the Protestant Reformation, the birth of the modern mind. It was a glorious liberation, yes, but it was also a catastrophe. It destroyed the web. The villagers stood up. He cut the threads that tied him to the land, to the Lord, to the church. He stood alone, and he felt the wind blow through him. It was cold. He was free, but he was also exposed. He was no longer a part of the great chain of being. He was a loose link. He turned his eyes away from the church tower. He looked down at the ground, at the soil. I can own this, he thought. I can buy it. I can sell it. The land became a commodity, not a mother, not a provider, a thing. The peace of the seasons was replaced by the greed of the market. The Lord tried to stop it. He passed laws, he sent his men with whips, but you cannot whip a thought out of a man's head. The idea was out, the idea of freedom. The villagers packed their bags. They left the mud. They went to the towns. The village began to empty. The peace of the silence was replaced by the noise of the market. The peace of the rhythm was replaced by the speed of the coin. It happened slowly, like a rust eating through iron. One generation remembered the old ways. They told the stories. They sang the old songs. The next generation listened, but they didn't believe. The third generation didn't listen at all. They looked at the old ruins of the monastery. They looked at the overgrown tracks in the forest. They said, "Look at those backward people. How primitive, how dirty. Thank God we are modern." They didn't know what they had lost. They thought they were moving forward. They thought they were climbing a mountain. They didn't realize they were falling off a cliff. The peace of the village was not sustainable. It was too fragile. It required a belief that the world had lost. It required a God that was dead. And so the sleeping history turned into a nightmare, the nightmare of progress, the nightmare of the self. Can you hear them? The echoes are still here. They are in the names of our streets, Church Street, Manor Road, Mill Lane. They are in the festivals we pretend to celebrate. Halloween, we dress up as monsters to scare away the spirits, but we don't believe in the spirits anymore. It's just a costume party. Christmas, we bring a tree into the house, we light candles, we sing about a child in a manger. But for most of us, it's about shopping, about stress, about debt. We are mimicking the rituals of the village, but we have lost the meaning. We are like actors who have forgotten the play. We go through the motions, we say the lines, but we feel nothing. We are hungry for the connection. Why are we obsessed with Lord of the Rings? Why are we obsessed with Game of Thrones? Why do we love stories about kings and knights and castles and magic? Because we are trying to remember. We are trying to remember the time when the world made sense, when there were clear lines between good and evil, when there was a quest, a purpose, when the hero fought the dragon. In the modern world, there are no dragons. There is just the spreadsheet. There is no dark lord. There is just the rect. We are bored. We are spiritually starving. We build virtual villages in our video games. We farm digital crops. We build digital walls. We pretend to be medieval lords. We pretend to be peasants. We are trying to go back. We are trying to unlearn the modern. We are trying to find the silence again. But we can't, because the silence is gone. The silence was the product of the isolation of the village. We are connected to everything. We are connected to everyone. We are entangled in a web of noise that stretches around the globe. There is no escape. There is no forest deep enough to hide in. The echo is fading. The voices of the ancestors are getting quieter. Soon they will be gone. Soon we will forget that there was ever another way to live. We will be the only history left, the history of the machine, the history of the noise. And that is the saddest ending of all, to be the first generation who does not dream of the past, to be the first generation who has no peace to return to. Go to a ruined abbey, go to a deserted village, stand in the middle of the field where the church used to be. All that is left is a few feet of stone wall. The grass is growing over the foundation. Touch the stone. It is cold. It is rough. Run your hand over the moss. This stone was cut by a man 800 years ago. He stood here where you are standing. He felt the sun on his neck. He felt the sweat in his eyes. He was building a house for God. He thought it would stand forever. He thought his children would worship here, and their children, and theirs. He was wrong. The roof collapsed, the walls fell, the people left. The silence swallowed the stone. But the stone has a message for you. It is not a message of defeat. It is a message of warning. The stone says, nothing you build will last, not your cities, not your empires, not your internet. It says, the only thing that matters is how you lived. Did you love? Did you protect? Did you find peace? The medieval village is a ghost, but it is a ghost that haunts us for a reason. It is the ghost of the sustainable life. They lived for 1,000 years on that land without destroying it. They fed themselves without poisoning the water. They clothed themselves without filling the land with plastic. We have been here for 200 years, and we are already running out of time. We are burning the furniture to keep the house warm. We are eating the seed corn. The medieval peasant would look at our world and he would be terrified. He would see the smoke from the factories. He would see the dying oceans. He would say, "You have offended the spirits. You have broken the covenant." And he would be right. We need to learn the lesson of the sleeping history before we become the history that sleeps forever. We need to slow down. We need to listen to the seasons. We need to find the rhythm, or the rhythm will break us. The sun is going down on the documentary. The screen is fading to black. We have traveled far. We have walked through the mud. We have knelt in the church. We have seen the peace. We have seen the horror. We have understood why they lived that way, and we have understood why we can never go back. The past is a foreign country. We can visit it, but we cannot live there. We cannot unknow what we know. We cannot unsee the modern world, but we can take a piece of it with us. We can take the silence. We can turn off the noise. We can put down the phone. We can sit in the dark. We can listen to our breath. We can remember that we are not the masters of the earth. We are just the tenants.
We are just travelers passing through. The medieval villager is dead. The village is dust. The Lord is a skeleton in a tomb. But the peace is still there, waiting in the spaces between the thoughts, waiting in the pause between the heartbeats. Go there now. Close your eyes. Let the modern world dissolve. There is no traffic. There is no internet. There is just the fire, the mud, the stars. You are home. You are safe. Sleep now. Sleep the long sleep of history. If you were to take a spade and dig down into the earth beneath your feet, not too deep, just a few feet, you would break the surface of the modern world. You would cut through the concrete, the pipes, the tangled wires of the electric grid. Keep digging. You would hit a layer of black. This is the soaks of the Industrial Revolution, the burned coal of the engines that changed the world. Dig deeper. The soil changes. It becomes darker, richer. It smells of old leaves and wet earth. You have reached the time of the village. Here, in the strata of the dirt, lie the secrets they didn't tell us. Not the history of battles and kings, but the history of the hands. Here are the bones of the cows they slaughtered. Here are the shards of the pottery they drank from. Here are the iron nails that held their roofs together. They are still here, quiet, decomposed, but present. We walk over them every day. We drive our cars over their graves. We build our skyscrapers on their foundations. We think the past is gone. We think it is a story we can close and put back on the shelf. But the past is not a story. It is a place, and we are standing in it. The soil remembers the shape of the plow. The trees remember the touch of the axe. The water remembers the thirst of the cattle. And perhaps we remember too. Deep in our blood, deep in the marrow of our bones, there is a memory, a genetic memory of a time when the rhythm of the day was the rhythm of the body. Why do we feel a sudden, inexplicable peace when we walk into a forest? Why does the sound of rain on a roof make us feel safe? Why do we crave the warmth of a fire? It is the villager waking up inside us, the ancient soul stretching. We are not strangers to this world. We are its children. But we are children who have forgotten our parents. We are orphans who have forgotten our home. And the ghosts of the village are trying to remind us. They whisper in the moments between our thoughts. They tug at the hem of our consciousness. Slow down, they say. Look at the sky. Remember the mud. Listen to them. They are the only ones who can tell us the truth about who we are. Close your eyes again, tighter. Shut out the hum of the refrigerator. Shut out the distant traffic. Shut out the drone of the airplane miles above. Imagine a world without engines, a world where the only sounds are the sounds of life and the sounds of nature. This is the acoustic geography of the medieval village. It was a loud world, but it was a different kind of loud. It was the crash of the blacksmith's hammer, clang, clang, the heartbeat of the village. It was the lowing of the cattle in the morning, the bleating of the sheep. It was the creak of the wooden wheels, the splash of the laundry in the stream. It was the shout of the farmer to the dog, the laughter of the children. And underneath it all, the silence. The silence was the canvas. The sounds were the paint. In the modern world, silence is extinct. We have filled every corner of the air with noise, music, alerts, notifications, the constant chatter of the digital voice. We are afraid of the quiet. We put headphones on to drown it out. But in the village, the quiet was a friend. On a summer afternoon, when the work stopped, you could hear the grass growing. You could hear the bees buzzing in the clover. You could hear your own heartbeat.
And at night, the acoustic geography changed completely. The darkness brought with it a symphony of the unknown, the howl of the wolf in the distance, the screech of the owl, the rustle of something moving in the hedgerow. These sounds told you where you were. They told you that you were surrounded by the wild. The villagers knew the language of the sounds. The cry of the fox meant the chickens were in danger. The croak of the raven meant a storm was coming. The church bell meant God was watching. They lived in an intimate relationship with sound. They didn't block it out, they absorbed it. It kept them alive. It connected them to the world. We have lost this connection. We live in a sonic bubble. We hear the world through speakers. We have forgotten the texture of sound, the grit, the timbre, the imperfection. The voice of the medieval villager was rough. It was weathered by the wind and the smoke. It didn't come from a microphone. It came from the belly. When they sang loud. They had to be heard over the wind. They sang in harmonies that were centuries old, harmonies that vibrated in the chest. They didn't sing to be famous. They didn't sing to be recorded. They sang to keep the spirits away. They sang to make the work go faster. They sang because the silence was too heavy to bear alone. If you listen very closely on a windy night in an old house, you might still hear them, the faint ghostly echo of a song that has been sung for 1,000 years, a song about the grain, about the sun, about the eternal return. Listen, it is the sound of humanity before we got lost in the noise. There is a secret that the historians often leave out. The village was not always solemn. It was not always bowed in prayer. Once a year, the world turned upside down. It was called the Feast of Fools, the Carnival. It was the time when the madness was allowed to come out. For a few days, the rules were broken. The lord served the peasant. The fool became the king. Men dressed as women, women dressed as men. Everyone wore masks. They danced in the streets. They drank until they fell down. They mocked the priest. They mocked the mayor. It was a sanctioned riot. Why did they do this? Because the pressure was too high. The weight of the hierarchy, the weight of the rules, the weight of the constant fear. If they didn't let the steam out, the boiler would explode. So they created a space where everything was backwards. It was a safety valve, a ritual madness. They understood the human psyche better than we do. We try to be sane all the time. We try to be productive all the time. We smile at our bosses. We follow the laws. And then we go home and we collapse, or we snap. The medieval villager let the beast out. They wore grotesque masks, masks with giant noses, masks with leering mouths. They became the demons they feared. By becoming them, they could control them. They danced the dance macabre, the dance of death. They danced with skeletons. They laughed in the face of the grim reaper. Ha ha, you will take us all, rich and poor, young and old. It was a dark, terrifying, joyous realization. In the eyes of death, everyone is equal. The carnival was the shadow side of the piece. It was the darkness that balanced the light. Without it, the piece would have been brittle. It would have shattered. We need to find our carnival again. We need to find a way to let the shadows out, to dance with the skeletons, to laugh at the absurdity of it all, before the madness eats us from the inside. Go into a cathedral, any old cathedral in Europe. Look up at the roof bosses, the carvings where the stone ribs meet. Look at the foliage, the leaves, the vines. Look closely. Emerging from the leaves is a face, a human face. Eyes staring, mouth open, leaves spewing from his lips. This is the green man. He is the spirit of the forest.
He is the God of the vegetation. He is older than the church. He is older than Christ. He was there when the Celts worshipped the oaks. He was there when the Romans built the roads. And when the Christians built the cathedral, they didn't destroy him. They carved him into the stone. They put him right up there, next to the angels and the saints. Why? Because they couldn't get rid of him. He is the truth that the church could not kill, the truth that we depend on the green earth, that we come from the leaves and we will return to them. The villagers looked up at the green man every Sunday. They saw his face staring at them from the dark wood. He was their Lord too, the Lord of the wild, the Lord who ruled outside the village walls. The Lord in the manor ruled the fields. The green man ruled the forest. The village was a truce, a negotiated settlement between the order of man and the chaos of the wild. The villagers respected the green man. They left offerings for him. They feared him. They knew that if they took too much from the forest, the green man would take something from them, a child, a cow, the harvest. He is the reminder that we are not masters of the earth. We are just a part of the green, breathing, rotting, growing mess. Today, we have forgotten the green man. We cut down the forests. We pave the fields. We think we are the masters, but the green man is still there, waiting in the weeds that crack the pavement, waiting in the ivy that climbs the abandoned building, waiting in the moss that grows on the roof tiles. He is patient. He is eternal. He knows that we will fall. He knows that the concrete will crumble. And when we are gone, the leaves will grow back. The vines will cover our cities. The trees will swallow our skyscrapers. The green man will laugh. He will wear our faces in his foliage. We will become the mask. The peace of the village was the peace of knowing this, knowing that nature always wins in the end. So you might as well make friends with the leaves.